Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. How do you spend your weekends? Probably with your family, watching movies or reading books, walking with friends, or attending various events. The same cannot be said for the anti-hero of our story. A young man ordered pizza and groceries to his home, stocking up on sweets. But he decided to spend his weekend in a rather unconventional way, disposing of evidence of a crime. There was not a hint of remorse in him. The convict finally carried out his monstrous plan and enjoyed the process. The events that occurred early Sunday morning, February 6, 2022, in the city of Aalborg, Denmark, resemble a horror movie plot. Unfortunately, reality is scarier. There are no staged scenes or special effects, and the victim's suffering is not faked. In this incident, everything is real. From the trap into which an innocent girl fell to her brutal end, and the sacrilegious concealment of evidence. This time, we are talking about the criminals living among us. Mia. 22-year-old Mia Skadhauge Steven was a sweet and sociable girl. From a young age, she loved helping people, so she chose a future profession in medicine. In 2016, she enrolled at Aalborg University, the largest in the country, in her chosen specialty. Her classmates noted her inquisitive mind and the enthusiasm with which she approached her studies. As you know, studying medicine is quite difficult and extensive, but the energetic girl could handle everything. She led a healthy lifestyle and took care of herself. Besides, she tried her hand at modeling and even participated in several photo shoots. The night after lockdown. In 2022, her student days were coming to an end. Soon, there would be the final exams and graduation. Perhaps this is why the heroine of our story decided to relax and enjoy her last free days. Moreover, the lifting of restrictions imposed during the COVID-19 pandemic became a reason for celebration. Finally, all the country's residents could fully socialize and meet. Bars and clubs were gradually filling up. The country's population, tired of seclusion, took to the streets. Mia was no exception. Together with friends, she decided to celebrate the end of the semester and joined the mass festivities. However, that evening she misjudged her choice of outerwear and drinks. Apparently, she planned to get home by car with friends, so she dressed nicely but too lightly. The same went for alcoholic beverages. Her group moved from one party to another, alternately changing bars. So when the youth decided to stay in one of the clubs, Steven didn't notice how tipsy she became. Fatigue and lack of experience with alcohol took their toll. A friend recalled that such a state was uncharacteristic for Steven. She was having a lot of fun and dancing even with strangers and didn't want to stop. By 6 a.m., the club's closing time, almost no one was left. Many of her friends had already left earlier, so there was no one to give her a ride. Besides, she had spent all her money, and there was nothing left for a taxi. Because of this, Mia decided to wait for the bus. She spent some time with a 22-year-old guy she met at the party. At the bus stop, the pair talked about something, after which the young man left. Apparently, they were not going the same way, or he decided to walk home. Be that as it may, several hours passed after they parted, but the future nurse never returned home. She didn't return to her family the next day, or the day after. Less than a week later, North Jutland police officers made an official statement. After Mia Steven disappeared, her remains were found in the forests of Dronninglund, a small town with a population of about 3,500 people. What led to her demise, and why her body was dismembered into 231 parts, we will find out next. Disappearance. Denmark is one of the countries with the lowest crime rate. It is known that its citizens feel happy and at peace. Certainly, out of the ordinary cases do happen. Such incidents cause a wave of indignation, and the entire public follows the developments closely. However, this occurs infrequently and serves as an exception in their otherwise calm lifestyle. That's why the Steven family didn't immediately rush to the authorities after their daughter's disappearance. She didn't return at the scheduled time, but everyone understood there might be an explanation. It was the first night after isolation, and the girl had probably stayed out late. Nevertheless, It's not to say her parents weren't worried. They simply believed that Mia would show up soon. But when that didn't happen, they called her boyfriend. He replied that he hadn't been able to reach her since the previous night, as her cell phone was off. When all of Mia's friends and acquaintances were finally called, and none had seen her since the club, the family's patience ran out. This behavior was unlike her. If she was ever late, she would always notify them. Ultimately, the Stephen couple turned to the authorities for help. Fortunately, the police responded immediately and began the investigation. Search. In the meantime, the girl's family continued their search. Her father drove around, carefully inspecting the surrounding area. Her mother and sister reached out to their social media audience, asking for any information about the missing girl's whereabouts. Her photo was circulated widely. The entire community rallied around their plight. Detectives began their work by gathering as much information as possible about the events of the previous night and early morning. They sought assistance from local residents living near where the girl supposedly disappeared. The police asked for CCTV footage, as well as photos and videos from the party. About 400 calls came in from concerned citizens willing to share any materials they had. Consequently, the authorities obtained more than 1,000 files. It goes without saying how challenging the task ahead of the specialists was. It took several days to solve it. Mia's friends couldn't forgive themselves for leaving her alone, fearing she might have frozen. However, she was nowhere to be found on the city streets. The initial videos provided no substantial results, but they confirmed her friends' statements. Mia indeed left the club around 6 a.m. and headed toward the bus stop. There, she was joined by an acquaintance she met earlier. They chatted for a bit, and he left, leaving the girl to wait for transport. The police managed to find and interview this guy. He detailed his acquaintance with the girl and explained his route after the club. His alibi was confirmed, and after a brief conversation, he was no longer a suspect. While some officers continued to analyze data from various sources, others interviewed everyone Mia had contact with that night. However, their testimonies did not advance the case. Next, the investigation focused on studying the missing girl's personality and lifestyle. It was revealed that she dreamed of a career in healthcare, was diligently studying, and was simply a good person. She had not been known to abuse alcohol, use prohibited substances, or suffer from any mental health issues. However, that evening, many noted her unusual behavior. She drank much more than usual and behaved somewhat excessively freely at times. Could such behavior have backfired on her? There was no other explanation for her disappearance. Everyone around Mia stated that she had no enemies or ill-wishers. A random stranger from the party might have misinterpreted her actions and thought she was an easy target. Suspects. When more than 3 days had passed since the disappearance, investigators did not expect a favorable outcome. By this time, no one had reported her whereabouts or demanded a ransom. This could only mean one thing: the girl was no longer alive. In any case, the chances of finding her alive were rapidly dwindling. Her relatives continued to hope for the opposite, while detectives sought to speed up the investigation. Finally, on February 9th, 2022, the first suspects emerged. Investigators didn't stumble upon two young men, childhood friends, by accident. In the past, the guys had been noticed by law enforcement and were under suspicion multiple times. However, the next day, one of them was released, while the other remained behind bars. The reason was that there was no substantial evidence against the first man, and he also had a confirmed alibi. This was not the case for the second detainee, 36-year-old Thomas Thompson, who denied any involvement in the girl's disappearance. But it was evident he knew something, as he had access to the vehicle Mia Steven got into on that ill-fated morning. Initial evidence. On February 8th, a breakthrough occurred in the investigation. Thanks to eyewitness accounts, specialists mapped out Mia's presumed route from the bar to the bus stop. Along this path, additional surveillance cameras had been set up to capture the girl. It was found that at 6:09 a.m., a black van approached her. The driver seemingly offered her a ride, but she refused and the vehicle drove away. Mia proceeded to the bus stop and met the guy from the party. After he left, she stayed there for a while, but the bus never came. By 7:30 a.m., the girl was thoroughly frozen. She walked back and forth to stay warm, jumping in place. She seemed completely desperate and didn't know what to do. So when the familiar van approached again, she got in. Mia's parents couldn't believe that their cautious and responsible daughter would do such a thing. However, they speculated that she did it because she was freezing. Nevertheless, the new information brought the case back to life. Apparently, the van driver could have been the last person to see the girl alive, so he needed to be found and questioned. Carefully reviewing the video footage, law enforcement officers managed to make out the vehicle's license plate. This led them to the suspects who had been using the van. Thomas Thompson was born in Southeast Asia, but later moved to a small place in Denmark with a population of just over 500 people. Initially, his family rented an apartment, but they later moved in with relatives and helped around the house. As a young man, he built a military career and achieved the rank of sergeant. During this time, he held a responsible position and was interested in martial arts. Thomas even received a certificate verifying his knowledge in first aid. After completing his service, he trained as an electrician and was considered a qualified specialist. His colleagues described him as a responsible employee, outwardly calm and approachable, but noted some peculiarities. His mood often changed quickly. In a short moment, he could become sad and pensive, although he had been cheerful and sociable before. Such sharp mood swings were attributed to his military past. It was known that he didn't consume alcohol or prohibited substances. He lived alone in a house located near the club and owned a black 2015 Volkswagen, which led to his arrest. It turned out that the vehicle in question belonged to Thompson, and he didn't have a confirmed alibi. Investigators suspected that he was the one who gave the girl a ride, after which she disappeared. But confirming this theory required more information and time. Burial. The confiscated van was thoroughly examined. Some experts focused on analyzing the material samples, while others began studying the GPS data. Interesting information emerged. Approximately 4 hours before Thomas met Mia, he attempted to disable the tracking system. However, it malfunctioned and reactivated after some time. Later, detectives managed to restore the exact route taken by the suspect's vehicle. It started from his home, made several loops, stopped near the girl, then continued on. Eventually, it picked up Mia and headed out of Aalborg. Thomas drove through several towns and turned into a wooded area where he spent some time, only to reappear a couple of days later. This part of the route undoubtedly raised the most questions. The suspicious coordinates were investigated. Specially trained dogs participated in the search operation. The animals soon found a hair tie, torn clothes and underwear, and other women's items, all at some distance from each other. Notably, their arrangement resembled a straight line, suggesting someone had chased the woman. She fell, was attacked, and fought back. The owner's frequent stops indicated he could have pursued a girl who occasionally escaped the vehicle. Meanwhile, the dogs followed the trail and led the forensics team deeper into the forest. Among the vegetation were patches of freshly dug earth. Thus, under a thin layer of soil in several places, 231 fragments of a human body were found. Autopsy. It didn't take long to identify the discovery. The remains belonged to the missing Mia Steven, but their condition complicated determining the cause of death. Most specialists lean towards asphyxiation, with the possibility of exploitation, even posthumously. Over time, more was uncovered. The unfortunate girl's body had been assembled like a puzzle, with some parts missing. Here's how Hans Petter Haugen, a seasoned pathologist, described it. This was a challenging task for forensic experts. None of us are accustomed to handling such cases. An electric saw was used to dismember the victim. The suspect tried to dissolve the body parts in drain cleaner and covered them with caustic soda. When he realized it wasn't working, he buried them in different places. Imagine how brutally the heroine's body was dismembered to prompt such an assessment from someone who had performed over 12,000 autopsies. Beginning of interrogations. During the initial interrogations, Thomas remained composed. He pretended not to understand why he was detained, but didn't resist fiercely. When asked why he had disabled the tracking system, he offered an absurd explanation. He claimed he had angered a police officer who later pursued him at every opportunity. However, it turned out this wasn't Thomas's first fabrication. The investigation revealed that the attempt to disable the device occurred at 2:14 a.m. Due to a malfunction, the machine registered every 15 seconds, and it was reactivated at 9:23 a.m. Most likely the girl was no longer alive by then, and the suspect took her to his home for dismemberment. On February 10th, a press conference was held with public representatives. Detectives discussed the investigation's progress and shared available information. They announced that the missing girl was deceased and that the suspect was in custody. Authorities promised to uncover the truth and keep city residents informed. They were earnest in their commitment, especially after the terrible truth about the potential criminal came to light. Apparently, a maniac was operating in the city. It turned out that Thompson had far more serious offenses than law enforcement had previously thought. His psychological issues had been evident for some time. In 2019, he was caught peeping on a female student. Similar incidents occurred in 2015 to 2016, when he was caught looking into the windows of young women and engaging in inappropriate behavior. One of the women reported the incident to her parents, who called the police. During the investigation, a profile was created based on descriptions that closely resembled Thomas's appearance. However, he was not apprehended. Moreover, investigators had every reason to believe that this was not an isolated incident. 12 years ago, an even more terrifying event took place. A woman contacted the police reporting an attempted assault. She claimed she woke up in the middle of the night to someone touching her. When she opened her eyes, she saw a stranger next to her but couldn't make out his face. Her awakening prompted the assailant to become more aggressive. He attacked the woman and began undressing her, but she started to resist and call for help. Fortunately, she wasn't alone. Two friends she shared the apartment with rushed to her aid. The stranger headed for the open window and escaped, likely entering the same way. Police were called to the scene, but they were unable to catch the suspect. Due to a lack of evidence and the statute of limitations, it was impossible to bring the suspect to justice. However, there were strong reasons to suspect his involvement. Meanwhile, the affected women could be included in the case as witnesses whose testimonies contributed to the suspect's profile. When investigators spoke with Thompson's former girlfriends, other disturbing scenes from his life surfaced. It turned out that in relationships, he quickly went from being a sweet guy to a manipulator and aggressor. One woman admitted that after breaking up with him, she found the brake lines in her car cut. She immediately suspected her ex-boyfriend, with whom the breakup had been difficult. Fortunately, she wasn't harmed, but proving his involvement was impossible. Another woman recounted even more horrifying details. Thomas had sadistic tendencies in intimate situations. He would tie her naked to a radiator and take advantage of her. A third woman told investigators about strange files she accidentally found on his computer. It was a list of women with dates of their menstrual cycles. How he obtained this information was unclear, but it painted terrifying pictures in the imagination. It's worth noting that Thomas easily started romances. He had an attractive appearance and was popular with women. Changing stories. During the search of Thompson's home, forensic experts discovered bloodstains. After comparative analysis, it was established that the traces belonged to the victim, confirming that after the brutal crime, the suspect brought the girl to his place. Furthermore, genetic testing of materials from his car matched Mia's samples completely. There was no doubt about the man's involvement. However, everyone wanted to hear his account of the events. After undeniable evidence was obtained, the suspect began to speak. However, throughout several interrogations, he changed his story. It was clear he was lying and trying to shift the blame. In any case, the following came to light. Thomas admitted that he did indeed give Mia a ride, but denied intentionally waiting for her. He claimed he wanted to do a good deed by giving the freezing girl a lift home. According to him, she behaved boldly and said she wasn't in a hurry, so he suggested driving around for a bit, to which she agreed. They drove through the city for a while, and then headed toward the woods, where they were intimate. However, something went wrong, and she had a seizure, during which she fell and broke her neck. However, in another statement, he changed his story, claiming that she accidentally suffocated due to the strap of her bag pressing on her neck, which Thompson also attributed to an accident. He also said that Mia eventually got out of the car and ran away, but she tripped and fell, sustaining a dangerous injury. Regardless, the girl was on the verge of death, and instead of providing first aid, which he was trained in, he let her die. He then took her home and disposed of the body in a callous manner. The suspect insisted he didn't want to call emergency services because he feared they wouldn't believe him and would accuse him of the crime. So he devised an elaborate plan. Initially, he tried to dissolve her body, which lay in a chemical solution for about a day, but the result didn't satisfy him. He then dismembered the remaining parts and buried them in the woods, scattering the smallest pieces around. He also mentioned attempting to dispose of his stained clothes by burning them and pointed to the site of the fire. There, detectives found leftover fragments and some tools used in the crime. Thomas tried to portray the events as a ridiculous accident, with the method of disposing of the body as a result of panic. However, the girl's relatives were outraged by his testimony. They were certain that Mia would never have agreed to be intimate with a stranger, considering his words blatant lies and blasphemy. Investigators held the same opinion. Before them sat a ruthless criminal pretending to be a victim of circumstance. The method of destroying evidence alone spoke volumes. Verdict. According to detectives, on the night of February 6th, Thomas went on the hunt. He finally found a suitable victim, waiting for her to be completely frozen and let her guard down. The suspect offered her a ride home, but once she got into his van, he began to threaten her, likely using a weapon. The girl resisted and tried to escape several times, but the odds were against her. The man managed to take advantage of and deprive the poor girl of life. Forensic experts believed asphyxiation was the most likely cause of death, but we must remember that not all body parts were found, which could hold other grim secrets. The fact of the attack was undeniable, and the crime was the result of the victim's resistance. The assault was indirectly confirmed, but proving it was difficult, given the state of the body. Finally, Thompson was charged and brought to trial. During the hearing, former colleagues of Thomas testified for the prosecution, stating they had long suspected him of sadistic tendencies, citing videos shown during his service that evoked disgust and a thirst for revenge. However, the defendant's face showed different emotions. Scenes of egregious cruelty, where people were deprived of life and women were exploited, clearly delighted him. Regarding the defendant's mental state, psychiatrists provided their conclusion. They found him sane but described him as having narcissistic and antisocial personality traits. In other words, a sociopath incapable of compassion. In court, Thomas also denied being guilty of exploiting and depriving the girl of life, but he decided to take responsibility for the dismemberment. In June 2023, the 38-year-old man was found guilty of depriving Mia Stavin of life and indecent conduct with her body under aggravating circumstances. The court sentenced him to indefinite detention with the possibility of parole after 10 years, considering his behavior dangerous to society. However, in practice, such criminals tend to be released after 10 years. Remarkably, Thomas Thompson was acquitted of the exploitation charges due to a lack of evidence. Do you think the criminal received a just punishment? Can girls and women in Denmark continue to feel safe after this? Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel. There are many shocking stories ahead of you.